Hey everyone, welcome back to the final bonus episode of the Goat Surf Club in Senegal series. Today we're going to have a very unfiltered conversation. Over the course of the past month, you've seen a lot of our adventures in Senegal. And so today we're going to be talking all together just about some unfiltered things that we experienced and some things that we found entertaining, fun, or some things that didn't make the episode series in general. So it's going to be a very casual, fun conversation. There will be video clips kind of like overlaid throughout various different clips that didn't make the total series that we'll show here. So if you want to watch it, that's awesome. If you want to just like tune out and do dishes and walk around and listen to this as a podcast style episode, that is also okay. Whatever you want to do. But yeah, this is going to be an unfiltered conversation about our Senegal adventure. So kicking it off, you've seen a lot of me, you've heard a lot of my voice throughout this series. So we're going to open it up to Ben and Thomas and give a little bit more background on who they are and what they're all about. So maybe Ben, if you want to start, you can introduce like who you are, where you're living, maybe what you're doing when we're not with the Goat Surf Club, doing fun stuff, surfing around the world.
I'm based in Edinburgh, and since meeting Rue and Thomas at AC, I spent a lot of time in Wales and went to university in North Wales, and then got my first job in Wales working as a coastal scientist. And then I moved down to the south coast of England and continued that sort of work, looking at coastal erosion and flooding and the impact of surf and that kind of thing. And then wanted to sort of chase that more environmental sort of field, and took on a master's in environmental sustainability based here in Edinburgh, and then got a job here based in renewable energies. And now I mostly work on projects looking at floating offshore wind across the globe. And yeah, so based here in Scotland, surfing Scottish waves, and goal for this year is to get barreled in Scotland.
Hello. I'm Thomas, and I live in Tampere in Finland. I'm half Finnish, so I'm spending some time connecting with the Finnish side of my identity. I have not lived in Finland until now. So after meeting Rue and Ben on the south coast of Wales, where I fell in love with surfing and sustainability, I have traveled a lot and also did my bachelor's in the southwest of the UK, which I chose because I only chose universities that had options for surfing. So I luckily had a great experience surfing at university. And since then, I sailed from Indonesia to Turkey. I've gone to Scotland a few times to see Ben and surf up there. So that's been super, super epic. And now I'm studying my master's in sustainable business at Tampere University. Alongside that, I work part-time for a sustainability reporting company that helps companies look at their sustainability data and use it to become more sustainable. And yeah, it's super snowy outside, which is really nice.
I love it. Yeah, it's snowing a lot here too. I'm in Colorado, as a lot of you know from watching the series. I'm a filmmaker and photographer. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I moved here. So basically, we all met at this school called United World College, Atlantic College in Wales. And then I came back to the US and I went to university at Colorado College in Colorado Springs. I've since moved to Boulder, Colorado, where I'm at now, filming like skiing, surfing, climbing, biking films. And then, yeah, in 2021, guys, we went to Morocco, and then we got trapped there. And then we made this little fun little series about getting stuck in Morocco. Yep, COVID times for sure, because the borders closed because of a COVID variant. Then then we were like, okay, what do we do now? We should like do this again because people liked it. It got picked up by Outside, and we're like, this is so exciting. I'd never worked with Outside before. And so we're like, okay, well, Ben and Thomas clearly are like environmental experts, sustainability experts, and we can go meet with environmentalists and take this like one step farther and not just go on surf trips, but like meet with cool environmentalists along the way. So then we did Ireland, which is also out here on YouTube that you can watch. And then we were like, okay, that was like pretty sweet. Let's do it again. So we picked Senegal. I don't remember. Do you guys remember how we picked Senegal?
We were choosing between a list of countries, and in the end, it just sort of came down to right time of year, knowing people in the country itself, and then sort of we were searching for different stories, and Senegal just seemed like a really inspiring country that we would all three of us love to surf in, as well as meet some really inspiring people, which luckily we did end up getting to meet and interact with those sort of them and their communities.
Yeah, I was also super excited to go to Senegal because I've studied French for so long and always been really interested in the French speaking world beyond Europe. Um, and so Morocco was really cool, especially with Rue speaking some Arabic and me speaking some French, how we made do on that trip. And yeah, West Africa's caught my attention for sure because of the waves and the culture. We'd heard of Teranga, the Senegalese like warm-hearted welcomingness, I guess could be a way of describing it. And we also had some friends that were there that one could help us find cool stories and places to go, but also super lovely to see them.
Yeah, it was pretty sweet. I feel like I'd never been to West Africa, and I only knew about it because I obviously like knew about Senegal, but I only knew about the surfing in Senegal because of the Endless Summer, which was like in the 50s. And so it was kind of cool to like be there and like surfing some of these waves that they surfed like all those years ago, and the way that they documented it was like, I don't know, definitely a way that we probably wouldn't have choose to document it now. So it's kind of fun to almost go back to the place and be like, okay, there's like very exciting, cool local stories to be shared here, not just like, three foreigners coming in and surfing in this place and taking from the culture. I think it was kind of fun for us to brainstorm ideas on like, how do we aim to give back to a place and not just like go there and take waves and take stories and take pictures and leave, but how do we like try to give back? And I feel like having those local connections, like these are friends from high school, like when we all met each other, like one of our friends Steph and like Ida, who we spent time with in St. Louis, like they were in the episode and they were like, we hung with Ida's family in St. Louis in like the northern part of Senegal, which is like super cool. I don't know. And then Ben, like, I don't know, you went there when you were a kid, right? What was that experience like then versus now? Because we stayed with your dads. Like maybe explain like who Victor and Guyan and Rama are to you and your family.
I also just want to bring it back to what you were saying about the end of summer, and I think it's kind of beautiful that that was sort of the first surf film that I feel like the three of us really sort of connected with and watched. The three of us, and sort of took that as an inspiration for a lot of our surfing of just like going to different places and different environments and just enjoying being in nature and enjoying being with each other and just sort of having fun with surfing, not taking surfing too seriously ever. And I think that's something lovely that we've always carried with us. And going to this spot in Senegal was like us sort of, it was like a proof of our dedication to just having fun while surfing. And like we went to that spot and it wasn't that great on the day. Rue got a jellyfish in the face, and like that's very, for me, that's endless summer kind of culture, and it was a beautiful, amazing moment and hilarious. For me, not for Rue, I guess, but yeah. Sorry. Back to Victor. So Victor and his family we stayed with in Senegal. He was my dad's best friend in college, and in the 80s or whatever. And me and my family went to visit them when I was, yeah, like 12 or 13. I don't really remember. And that was definitely a pretty wild experience as a 13-year-old going to West Africa and like hanging out with this family in Dakar, and like so different to the community that I grew up in. And so for me, this trip was really cool as well because it was sort of like throughout the trip, memories were coming back to me of what things were like, and like it felt like this super distant, exotic sort of location when I was that age. and then going back and I don't know, seeing it with all that I've sort of experienced and learned, but then also seeing how the country has changed in 10, 12 years. Um, so that was really cool for me. And also seeing Guyane again, like Guyane when he was 8 years old was an absolute tank, and he still is. And when he was 8, he was just beating me up. And now he's, I don't know, 18, he is just destroying us at basketball. So it was nice to, add some rules to the beating, but yeah, no, that was lovely. Um, Rama and Victor were the greatest hosts we could have ever asked for. They were so welcoming and so loving and so caring, and they were just so happy to have us and to sort of share their country and their culture with us, and they were so excited to put sort of Senegalese meals in front of us, and they made that trip 10 times better.
Yeah, it really felt like we had especially a Senegalese mama. So big thank you to Alma for looking after us. And especially when things went a bit tricky towards the end of the trip with all the protests going on, we're very, very grateful to have been looked after by people that understand the local situation well. The most startling thing for me was the local surf culture was just so different from anywhere else I've experienced. Like there's times where you're in the water and the quality of surfing is really high around the world. There's times where you're in the water and there's loads of locals around the world, whatever their quality of surfing. And there's times in the water where you're like welcomed and there's good vibes. There's all these different things that sometimes you experience in the water. What was really cool about Senegal was that there were loads of locals in the water. The level of surfing was crazy high, but the vibe was still pretty good. And so you had to adjust because like it was super nice to see plenty of locals in the water. Sometimes you go on surf trips and there's hardly any. It's just tourists surfing. So that was really cool to see, and cool to see how surfing is an avenue to become a surf coach or to even become a professional surfer there. Because the level of surfing is that high. So that was really, really cool to see. Um, that was the thing that shocked me most. Like I've never just rocked up and people just throwing airs around me, left, right, and center.
Yeah, that was pretty sick. I feel like there was one spot that we went to. Well, we're not going to use any like specific location names to kind of protect the local spots, but there were three main waves that we've surfed. One we'll call Jellyfish because that's where they've done the jellyfish word, obviously. One we're going to call Coach Mamadou, who is the person that we met up with in the series. It's kind of like where he's based out of, right at that beach in that wave, which was one of our favorite waves. And then there was another spot that we'll call Urchins, where Thomas and Ben got a ton of sea urchins for their foot because they didn't wear booties. But at Urchins, I remember we like pulled up, we like rocked up in the taxi, we were like unloading the boards, and I was like setting up the camera to film you guys or whatever. And this guy like in like 6 inches of water with like a bunch of sea urchins on rocks underneath him is just throwing like massive airs. And I feel like we all looked at each other and we're just like, what the heck? Like these people are just going so hard and we are gonna look like such kooks. But thankfully they were like also super welcoming, which is cool. Because I feel like if there's a really high level of surfing in a specific area, I feel like they're not typically I feel like it's a little bit more like I don't know, you have to be really intentional about surfing etiquette and making sure you're sharing tons of waves with them and making sure you're not like overstepping because we're foreigners in a new area. But I feel like, I don't know, they were super welcoming and how we were able to take waves. Ben like was sung into a wave at one point by some dude, which is pretty rad.
Sung off a wave.
Sung off a wave.
Yeah,
Wait,
that's
I thought you sung.
well. I don't know.
That was
I think that was the only intimidation tactic that was ever used over me. And this guy just started singing as he was paddling into a wave that I was paddling for as well. And I have never experienced that before, so I was naturally put off. And I don't know whether his intention was to be welcoming or if it was to put me off. But for sure, I got put off and did not make that wave. But I was okay with it because I was sung to.
So maybe the moral of the story for all surfers listening is if you're calling someone off a wave, you have to do it in song form.
Tom, can you talk about like the size? Well, okay, actually, before the reason I'm asking Tom this question is Tom, you worked as a lifeguard for a long time. I feel like it's generally agreed upon in the Goat Surf Club, much to Ben and I's dismay, that you are the best surfer of the group. You have the most experience, and especially in like forecasting and reading waves, I feel like you are somebody that we turn to be like, what are the waves doing in the next couple of days? Um, so the reason I'm asking you this question is I feel like you are kind of like, when we're on the ground, kind of that little wave expert on what to talk about and where to go. So what did you think of the actual like shape and the size and the different pieces of the actual, maybe the swell season we were going? Maybe you can talk about that for a hot sec.
I mean, I love all this stuff. And Senegal, especially Dakar, is a really, really interesting geographical option because it's a peninsula, which is basically what surfers look for on coastlines, because it means that where the swell is coming from north, south, or whatever, like Senegal is a western facing peninsula, so it receives swell from north and south and everything in between westwards. So that means that you have different coasts to play with depending on different swell and wind conditions. So like I said in the videos, we thought we were in for an easy one. And also in classic GSC over optimism, we were like, oh, we're getting there like in between swell seasons. Maybe that means we get the best of both worlds. Instead of thinking maybe we'll get neither of the leftover winter swells it would have been and the arriving summer swells. Maybe in my head I was like, oh great, we'll get some like nice little winter swells and some nice little summer swells. And so we didn't quite get that lucky. But because of where Senegal's situated and the swells it does receive, we were surfing some of the swells that get left over from Morocco. And as surfers will know, Morocco has incredible, incredible waves. So you get that, but with less size. So we got some really perfectly shaped waves, just smaller. And so, especially watching the videos back, I look at them, I'm like, oh my gosh, that is a delightful wave. And then I remember in the moment, I was a bit disappointed at times. But we were surfing these wonderful quarter pipe shaped waves. And like from some of the footage, you can see that there's like pancake flat water everywhere. And then suddenly this wave comes out of nowhere at Coach Mamadou's. And that's like just amazing when you're like, oh wow, there's just a reef here that's perfectly situated such that this pancake flat ocean can suddenly create a wonderful, wonderful healing wave. So that was really cool to see, regardless of the size. And yeah, looking back at the footage, we had enough. We had enough size to play with. And at the end of the day, we all got to ride on that red fish that's been with us since the start. That's a board that Rue bought whilst we were living in Wales together. And so that board has come everywhere with us. It's changed hands between the three of us multiple times. And the fact that that board was most suited to the conditions was like really wonderful as well. And like I would say mine and Rue's best waves of the trip were probably on that board. I don't know if she surfed it that much, Ben, but that was really cool because if the waves had been a bit bigger, that board might have sat in the board bag a bit too much. So that was also nice.
That's awesome. Oh, dude, that was such a good recap. I feel like it totally brought me back to surfing those waves. And I feel like for me, the size piece actually kind of was beneficial. I like surfing small waves, always have. Thomas is really tall, and I am 5'9", maybe 5'10" on like a good day. But because you're so much taller and you like surfing bigger waves, typically when you're filming you, things just like look a lot smaller, but it was pretty sweet because you're like, I'm not really that interested in surfing. Like I'm happy to film for a while. Like I like filming. Like Thomas was actually, when we were all together in Wales in like 2016, Tom was the one that was mostly filming us while we were out surfing. And so I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah, well, if you're not into it, like, and you're happy to film, that'd be great. And then I'll go surf. So if you watch the Senegal series all the way through compared to like Ireland and Morocco, like Morocco, I don't even know if I had any shots of me surfing. Ireland had like 2. Senegal, there was like a dozen plus shots of me in there because I'm like, oh, video of me surfing now. This is so fun. I'm not like stuck behind the camera because it really is just like the 3 of us out there. There's no other filmers or anybody.
Yeah, maybe that's the tactic for the next Goat Surfing Club trip. Make sure that we find small waves so that I just sit on the beach and film you instead.
Yeah, but it's also tough because like my favorite shot of the Ireland series, which I'll use like in a ton of different videos, is like you were doing this amazingly beautiful cutback, and there's this like spray coming off the back of the wave as well, and like the wind because it was so windy in Ireland. But you were doing this like beautiful cutback, and I was like, man, I gotta film Tom surfing more. And then in Senegal, you just like I mean, you still had some amazing waves. Like there are definitely some waves in there that you were scoring on for sure.
I think the issue there is that Tom had just come from like what was it 5 6 months of surfing through the Mentawais in Indonesia on a boat and sharing waves with Torren Martin. So of course you're gonna if you go on a surf trip after that and the waves are a little bit small, of course Tom's gonna be a little bit disappointed. Like he's just been surfing the best waves in the world. So
It's true. And I was stuck here in Colorado, landlocked, like surfing in rivers, trying to like get my surfing up to a point where I'm like, okay, I think I'll be good enough to like surf in the ocean pretty soon. But I was like training on rivers, and you were like training in the Mentawais. Um, yeah, pretty epic. Just kind of wrapping up the talk about surf because I feel like we could talk about surfing forever. Ben, if you want to maybe chat a little bit about the research part of the process and why we chose plastic pollution, maybe why we chose meeting up with the people we did, and can talk about the environmental impact piece.
yeah, I guess I'd like to start the segment off by saying like the us three have always had a very like surfing focus. We've always been very connected to nature, the three of us, since we first met. But then also like we have always had this very environmental focus. Like I think the first thing that we did, all three of us, that was a very bonding experience, was we started the Surfers Against Sewage Foundation within our school. Like you know, we started hosting events and talking about Surfers Against Sewage and sharing the great work that those guys do, and sort of working out how to sort of benefit their cause through the opportunities we had at school. So I think that's super awesome, and I think it's something that all three of us have always sort of thought about, and it felt like the natural thing to do to sort of pair surfing and environmentalism. Uh, and so yeah, and for me, it's my definitely my two biggest passions, and I love that we get to go to a country like Senegal and meet people who are doing really inspiring work. And the more and more we researched into Senegal, it did seem like one of the biggest issues that's beginning to that is being talked about there is plastic pollution. Um, and immediately we came across L'Homme Plastique, the Plastic Man, and then as we started to research more and more, we came across, the Surf Foundation's chapter in Senegal and Babacar, and then Tom came across the guys doing Provide the Slide, which is just an awesome cause as well. And I love that we get to go and talk to these people and hear how they're doing and get inspired to bring the learnings that we get from them and bring them home and that kind of thing. I don't know if you have anything you want to say about that, Tom.
Yeah, like when you go and visit somewhere as a surfer, you can sometimes end up with this really like tunnel vision perspective on the place, the country, the environment. Sometimes we'll even go somewhere and stay in one place. I mean, for Morocco, for example, we were at one spot the whole time. And so now that we engage with climate issues in the countries that we go to and are lucky enough to spend time learning from people that are working towards the issues in these places, it gives us so much more of a perspective beyond like, oh, that's a nice wave, and actually thinking, okay, like that's going on there, or this work is going on here, or this is how surfers here perceive the issues in their community, in their environment, and what they're doing about it. I think that's what's really cool, because surfing is, well, for me, surfing is the cause of my extreme passion for sustainability. And so it's just exciting talking to other people in other countries that have that, but then it's like, it's a different wave that touches their heart for them, or it's a different issue that touches their heart for them. And it's really cool to connect with surfers in that way.
I think it's cool as well going like beyond. I mean, this is like kind of what you just said, but I think going beyond visiting a place for one specific activity and getting to see various aspects of a place because of the various activities you do, right? Like if, for example, like if we were surfing and biking across Senegal, like that experience would be so different than the experience we had. Or like if we were surfing and, I don't know, dancing and meeting up with local dancers. Like, it's kind of this cool way to get involved in the culture in like a way that goes beyond that like tunnel vision you were talking about. And I think, like Ben touched on with like our background, all of us, and in like environmental issues and all of our like deep passion for caring about the planet, I think it's really exciting to go to these places. And like you've mentioned earlier, Tom, like we're all very optimistic. We are all optimistic environmentalists that really believe like there are solutions out there and there are good things happening and there are good people doing hard work to like help make the world a better place. And I think when it comes to like the media surrounding all of this, it's super easy to get lost in like the doom and gloom of the climate crisis. I mean, we call it like a climate crisis. That's not like a very uplifting, optimistic sentiment about the state of the planet. So I think it's fun for us, not just to like when we're on the ground, like have a different sort of experience. But I think it's also fun for us to like share some of our optimism about this and try to convince people like, hey, there are things that you think of as a really problematic issue, like plastic pollution, and for sure, like on the ground, for sure, it's a really difficult subject. But being able to meet up with people and like see what they're doing and see like how they're helping alleviate the issue is like a really exciting experience, both for us and as like as filmmakers, for us to like help share that story with broader people too. um, yeah, I think especially with the Plastic Man, like going and having that experience with him was like, I don't know, it's something I'll just like remember forever. And I didn't speak, like I don't speak French, so I didn't know exactly what he was saying in the moment. And like Tom, you translated bits and pieces, or I guess most of it, like while we were there, so we kind of knew what was going on. But even just like the whole experience of like planting the tree, seeing the kids come over, like walking through and hearing all of his thoughts about like this local green space that he's providing. It was just like such a, I don't know, warm experience, I guess. But I don't know if you guys have any other thoughts on like the Plastic Man interview in that day, because it was super special to all of us, I think.
I found the Plastic Man to be incredibly, like, yeah, as you said, like I also don't speak French. And but despite that, I somehow found him incredibly engaging, even though he was not speaking in the same language as me. Like the way he spoke, it was clear that he was so passionate about what he was talking about. It was insane, and clearly he's also impacted his entire community, and that was so beautiful to see. And like just random people would come up to us on the street, and clearly elder people in the community also had a massive respect for him. And we had, this guy who was in his mid 70s maybe come over and shake our hands and shake his hand and thank us for sort of clearly, because we were clearly filming him and sharing his story, and he was so proud that L'Homme Plastique was from his community and of all the work that the guy was doing. So it was awesome to see how much of an impact he had on everyone around him. And yeah, definitely really touching experience, and cool to see how much it was sort of resonating with me despite not speaking the language, and then looking at Tom and seeing Tom's face and seeing how much it was impacting him while I was sitting next to him and not understanding anything. I've never had an experience like that for sure.
I mean, it was obviously a privilege to be understanding what he was saying, um, but also therefore like a privilege to share that with you guys, like to be the messenger in that situation. Like was like really cool, um, because yeah, it was like, like us making these videos and being lucky enough to share these amazing stories to other people, to share the learnings that we've been able to have. In that situation, it was the same. It was like I was just receiving like pure wisdom from him and then able to pass it, like not pass it on, but communicate it. And it was like just like so nice to be able to be that avenue. And at one point, towards the end of our visit with him, he shook my hand and he just held it for like multiple minutes. And it was one of the like most profound like moments of physical connection I've had with someone. Um, it was it was amazing. Like I felt really, really honored to have been given such a long handshake by such a legendary man. Um, and but equally, it was really cool to see how you guys, even with the linguistic barrier, especially with the other guys that were there helping us plant the trees, like the connection that like the excitement that we all had around planting a tree, or like being like, "Whoa, that's a papaya? What?" or like, oh my gosh, you can use that plant for that. Like the fact that we were all excited about these things, like they were telling us what different leaves, what different fruits could do, and the community can just come in and help themselves to look after themselves, whether it's with food or for like medicinal purposes. Like we were connected with that hype. And so it was really cool to see. I feel like Ben, you especially bonded with Bach, the like what you came up with a really good term. Oh, I think I said it in French. You said like Bach, il est le master de truc or something.
Oh
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
remember
yeah.
exactly what you said.
The forest man, or the forest champion, or something. Yeah, the king of the woods, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, but in some funky Ben version of French. But it was so cool, and he was obviously hyped to have received that title from you. So yeah, it was really really cool. And like you said, Ruth, to see the from the kids of the community all the way up to the elders that walked by, like the impact he's having. And you were saying like every fourth house has either a tree in their outside or a tire filled with dirt that then they can grow plants from. Like this man knows that he's touched his community every fourth house. Like that was really, really cool to then imagine this mental map of L'Homme Plastique's impact.
It's so interesting, I think, too, with seeing somebody like him. Like we all, I mean, Tom, you're in Finland, Ben, you're in Scotland, I'm in the US. Like we're all a part of very different communities. And I feel like coming together and seeing the Plastic Man impact his own community in that way, I feel like we were all kind of left at the end of the day with this feeling of like, I think I can impact my community a little bit, you know? And I think something that is interesting about our experience in a place like Senegal is like we are clearly foreigners going there and just like trying to learn and understand like what they're doing on the ground. We're not going in with like our own agenda of like we're trying to tell this type of story or we're trying to go and like create this type of narrative about this place. We're really going and trying to like listen and understand and try to reflect that in the stories that we're sharing. And I feel like especially with the Plastic Man, like it left me with this feeling like almost of responsibility of like, okay, how do we communicate what he's doing in like 6 minutes, you know? Because it's so difficult to capture. And I feel like that was one of the reasons that I wanted to have this kind of conversation is I feel like there were so many things that he talked about that like we didn't get to include because if you're watching a 10-minute episode about like the goat surf club in Senegal, like you want to see surfing, you want to see some of the environmental piece, you want to get to know some of our personalities. Like there's a lot of different aspects to it. If it was like just a like we could make a 40-minute documentary just on the Plastic Man and our one day that we spent with him if we just like laid everything back to back to back and just like let the camera roll because everything he was saying was so fascinating. But I think it's interesting too when it comes to like the storytelling side of these things and like the reality for me, like not speaking French and being behind the camera for most of that experience, like trying to then piece it together and say like this is a man that clearly has so much like respect and ability to influence the culture of environmentalism in Senegal. How do we then like communicate that? And so I think that's like the challenge. And hopefully, like when you watch the episodes, you're like, oh, this was interesting and this was engaging and like I enjoyed this. And I'm inspired in the same way that hopefully we all are inspired. But I think for me, there's always going to be this gap of like our experience and what we got to chat with him about versus like what we ended up sharing. And I always am trying to like close that gap so that it's the same. But I think like hearing you talk about it, Tom, like I actually didn't even know this like that he had knowledge of all of those trees in front of houses and all of those tires and all of that stuff. Like I didn't even know that because I don't speak French and I didn't hear him say that. So it's kind of interesting even now, like learning these new sorts of things about it because there's like every one of us walked away with like our own experience from that. So I think it's kind of interesting to take that. And then the next day, like we were with Babacar, like it was like back to back days. So it was kind of cool to like continue, like get all inspired and feel like, whoa, plastic pollution, this is what's being done. And then like continue that conversation with Babacar too.
What I really reflected on a lot in this trip was like the different levels of action or whatever. So L'Homme Plastique is like obviously having such an impact on his local community, but he also spends so much time like lobbying the government. And Babacar also has loads of local impact, but then he's also part of this global network of the Surfrider Foundation. So he's realized he can have impact in the local business community by being a trailblazer with his zero waste restaurant, but also by joining forces with an international organization like the Surfrider Foundation, it's then given the local Dakar um, ocean conservation projects like more impetus and more momentum. So that was cool to realize how, there's going to be moments within our local action or whatever where we need to branch out and and use the benefit of a wider organization or of a bigger community or a bigger collective. And then there's going to be moments where like, yeah, you can touch your immediate community. So I liked how he did that. Um, and was like, yeah, it felt like a step that was needed to be able to create impact in Senegal as a whole beyond isolated projects within Dakar.
I think with the experience with Babacar that I found really impactful too. Like, not only was he approaching it in a sort of different way, but I'd learned about Babacar through a friend of mine here in Colorado who forwarded me an article about this Senegalese surfer like a year ago, like before we were even talking about like going and filming in Senegal. And there's this quote from Babacar that was like just so beautiful. And he said, "The seas are becoming landfills. We live this every day. We see it every day in the sea, on the shore. I love it here, but if I'm condemned to live with all of this rubbish forever, that would be sad." And I remember reading that. This is in a Guardian article. And I remember reading that line and being like, wow, this man is like so connected with the ocean and so connected with his local community and so connected to like, and so just dedicated to creating a solution for it that it was, I think, talking with him in person and having like, and hearing all of his background, like coming from this tribe that was near the ocean and how the sea was a sacred space and they like provided offerings and like there was almost this like spiritual connection to the ocean. I think hearing his words in the article like a year ago and then seeing him in person and hearing his thoughts about it and then going into the editing room and then hearing all of his thoughts about it and thinking like, how do we pair this together, it just became like so obvious to me that there are so many ways that you can benefit other people and there's so many ways to benefit the earth, like not only just in the people that you reach but in like just the ways you do it, like Babacar was like teaching surf lessons and giving local kids access to surfboards because he's like, hey, if we can get these kids excited about the ocean, we can get them excited about environmentalism potentially. Like if you can get kids stoked on surfing, you can get kids stoked on protecting those waves and that can like have this ripple effect. So I think it was really beautiful to see like not just like picking up like plastic pollution doesn't have to be solved by a beach cleanup. It can, and that definitely has an impact. But I think you can even go like even deeper and go into like the psychology of the minds of your community and think of like various different ways to solve this. It was just kind of exciting, I think, to think about it in new and different ways too.
All environments around the world, you can think of ways to get people excited about spending time in nature, and that could be the catalyst to make people engaged in conservation.
The quote that stuck with me from Babacar was, if you want to see hope, come to Africa. And that was just amazing when he said that to me. That was just really hit home, because having come straight from L'Homme Plastique and meeting his whole community there, and it was so clear that everyone just had a lot of hope, no matter how bad sort of the situation with plastic pollution was. They all had a lot of hope. And I think hope is so essential when it comes to all sort of environmental issues that we're facing. And I thought, so yeah, I thought that was a really beautiful thing. But I think also something that we maybe didn't touch so much on in the film, and maybe because we didn't want to, and that's not the message that we want to drive, but or maybe because it's harder to communicate, is that all of these people did have a lot of hope. Everyone we spoke to, and they were excited about what they worked on, and they were passionate and really cared about it more than anything. But they were all really sort of struggling and burnt out, and sort of were so aware of how bad the issues are, and how sort of how deep it goes, and how ingrown it is. And that was also really hard to see, and very real. Just sort of the people who are working the hardest, of course, are feeling the effects of it the most. But yeah, so to keep going, they had to have hope, and they did believe that good could come of what they're doing.
I think that's the interesting thing I think about the series in and of itself. Is like the best stories I think are the ones that have challenge and conflict in it. And it's really easy to go to a place and see people doing really good work and be like, they're doing great work. Like, here's like some flowers and congratulations, you're amazing. We love you here. Like, we'd love to feature you in our uplifting stories about the environment. And they're like, oh, great. Maybe this is a little win. But I think you're right, Ben. I think the reality of the situation is like pretty dire, and seeing like I think that is what is the most impactful for me. It's not that they're like doing good work and they're like picking up trash at their local beach and then their beach is clean at the end of the day. It's like this is a tough situation and they're like working really diligently and really hard and really strategically to try to like alleviate the problem. And it's sort of like why we celebrate professional athletes, right? It's like professional athletes go through a lot of really difficult moments of training that we don't see. And then we see them like topping the podium or like getting the gold medal or crossing the finish line first. And it's like, hey, way to go. They did great, you know? But for the athlete, it's like so much of the time is spent behind the scenes. And I think like if we had more time and more resources and more ability to tell like a more complete story about what they're doing, like I think the day to day of like this is actually what it takes to make a difference in the community, I think is a lot less glamorous than our experiences of like going and hanging out for a day with these people and seeing like on the ground like this is what success looks like. But I love that point. I think the people that work the hardest can have the most impact for sure.
Yeah, I just like I wanted to just connect your thoughts there nicely. Like Ben said, Babacar told us if you want to see hope, come to Africa. And I think that's a big reason why we did go, because we were hoping to see that and experience that, because these are the experiences that also then motivate us to in our careers, that motivate us in the sustainability work that we do, that motivate us in the other impactful storytelling you do in your career, Bru. So when he said that, I was like, yeah, man, like that's why we're here. Like, yes. And that, like Ben said, that hope and those moments of seeing like some little success stories in the climate space are the things that motivate you. Like, yeah, okay, it's a really dire situation, but like Ben said, to therefore be motivated, you have to find that hope, you have to find that optimism, you have to find that positivity in working together in a community, and solving the biggest problem the world's ever faced in a way like where it's crazy and hectic that we have to tackle the world's biggest issue ever, but also it's exciting that we get to be part of hopefully the solution to that, right?
So I also just wanted to say that in that hope, like you're talking about, Tom, they also were so focused on the next generation, and that's where the hope is. And that's, I guess, summed up across the sort of climate space and environmental space of just there's so much hope put on the younger generation and that next generation. And that's where L'Homme and Babacar really had their focus of, you know, nurturing this next generation and hoping that they carry on the good work that they're doing. Um, but then, if it's okay, I just want to transition from there to another story, which is related. Just another one of those stories that you just can't capture through through the camera. And it was our last day on in St. Louis, the jazz festival, and we just wanted to go to the beach and just chill out. And there's supposed St. Louis sits just behind a huge spit of sand, and there's sort of a beach community that lives there and a fishing community. We thought, great, we'll go to the beach and we'll just see what the beach is like. Hopefully it's beautiful. And we got there, and I'm pretty sure you guys will agree, it was one of the most sad beaches I've ever seen. It was covered in plastic. There were goats sort of eating from the plastic, and it was just clear that the system wasn't there to just get rid of the waste, and people didn't know what else to do with it, so they just threw the waste on the beach because what else would you do? And we sort of stood there for 10 minutes and looked at the beach and had a chat, and we were like, well, I mean, it's horrible, but it's still the beach, and the sea's still there, and the sea's beautiful, and there's so many people hanging out on this beach. And then some guys came along and just clearly emptied their cesspit on the beach, and the smell was so bad that we had to leave the beach. Just it was a really bad smell, and that's something you can't capture on camera.
Yeah, I remember that experience really well because I remember interviewing you, Ben, and I didn't have like a microphone or anything, so the audio didn't work out well, which is I think maybe a reason why it didn't end up in the final video. But I remember you saying something along the lines of, "I have been carrying around like this piece of trash that I've had, like I had, I don't know, candy bar or whatever, and like I've been carrying it around because I haven't seen like trash bins anywhere to throw this away." And then I feel like you started to kind of explain like here's how waste management systems work around the world, and it just we haven't really seen it work in that same way here. And so it's not like the onus is on the people, it's not like it's the people's fault for like ruining this beach, it's just there's not a system in place to help that situation improve. And so I think something that we were left with, and that like when we were leaving that beach was like, oh man, like things need to change. And it's like maybe the education around plastic needs to change, maybe getting rid of plastic needs to change, maybe having a proper plastic management system or a waste management system needs to change. But I think I remember that experience really well because I think it was really impactful for all of us, like walking away and being like, whoa, there is so much just trash and plastic sitting on the beach. And then it was like the next day that I was filming you surfing in a completely different area of Senegal, and there was like plastic in the ocean. It was like so hard to like disassociate. Like, oh, that plastic at the beach, like that ends up in the ocean.
Obviously, slightly different tone, but we are the Goat Surf Club, and I love how in our films goats always feature because they're just really funky animals. And we were so lucky to have these really amazing goat stories in Morocco and Ireland that either happened well, they both happened pretty spontaneously. And we knew that goats would be around in Senegal, so we thought, okay, spontaneous goat story. But like the main goats that we saw were these ones eating rubbish on the beach in Saint Louis. And so yeah, like goats for me now symbolize a bit the Goat Surf Club and like increasing engagement and motivation in climate issues. And so, of course, it was sad to see goats eating rubbish. Yeah, because normally when we're on a trip, it's like goats, we're the Goat Surf Club. But that moment was like, oh man, goats eating rubbish. What a shame.
Yeah, and I feel like goats as like a mascot for us, right? They're just like kind of funky, like they're not sheep, they're not cows, like they kind of don't have the same sort of purpose. I guess you can make like goat milk or do goat milk and goat soap. I know it's becoming more increasingly popular here in Boulder where people love their goat soap. But yeah, I think like having a mascot that's like kind of this like funky, like, well, like we're the Goat Surf Club, we're like uplifting and cool to have that dire situation be like, oh, right, this is like the effects of it. But I love that it's kind of I didn't know that, Tom, that it's kind of like becoming like this emblem almost of like environmental protection for you. Like when you see a goat, you're like, okay, like let's work, you know, let's like tell uplifting stories or let's like, you know, do more things to help make the world a better place. That's sick. I love that.
Tom, did L'Homme Plastique have much to say about sort of the systems in place in Senegal and how they're failing in terms of waste disposal, waste management?
Well, he said that at least now government and industry listens to him, whereas before they would just ignore him or think he was crazy. Um, and so now, like for example, on World Plastic Pollution Day, like they get multiple stakeholders together, including L'Homme Plastique and the government, to try and generate solutions. Um, but yeah, L'Homme Plastique said so much of his work goes to trying to create change in the government, and included within that is waste management. Because like you guys said, it's not the people's fault. Like they don't have anywhere to put it. They buy products that are made of plastic packaging. Like they don't have much of choice as a consumer to not buy plastic. And as as someone then disposing, they also don't have many options. So yeah, um, helping the trying to help the government acknowledge the solutions and work towards them is definitely a big part of this work.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, this is kind of an interesting transition, and I know Ben, you have a lot of thoughts on this too, because we saw it, like the impact of the protests also on the environment. So, like, obviously, protests were happening while we were there. That's like the point of episode 4. These protests broke out. We had planned to go to this mangrove charity, like just south of Dakar. It was going to be this like really amazing. We had planned like a boat ride, and also like we were going to talk with this nonprofit there, and they're going to walk us through like the impacts of these mangroves on the coastline, and we were really excited. This protest broke out. We couldn't do that. We were really bummed, but also like this really joyful Dakar that we were seeing was suddenly like kind of very seriously under like a lot of violent protests. And our experience in that was like what we were trying to share in the episode. We didn't want to comment like on what the protests were going about because we were foreigners, we weren't as educated on the exact issues. But something that we did notice was just like the impacts of like violence and unrest and like political instability on the environment as well. Ben, I don't know if you have thoughts about that. I know we talked a lot about it when we were there because we were just like sitting inside for 4 days, and we were like, this is kind of interesting things we are noticing, like glass getting broken, cars getting burnt, tires getting burnt, um, trash getting thrown aside. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or things you noticed.
Okay. I feel like this one's hard to comment on because the protests were about the political situation in Senegal, and that's not for me to comment on because I'm not from Senegal. And sometimes the environment is not the most important thing on people's minds. Sometimes getting their getting I don't know, feeling like your country is going in the right direction is more important. I don't really know what to say here. And it's a shame that we couldn't go and see the mangroves, but it was a situation that was out of our hands, and there wasn't really anything that we could do other than sit inside and just spend time with the lovely family that was hosting us and sort of help let them sort of educate us about the situation that was occurring in their country and try and be respectful about that. And we missed out on a couple of days of surfing and seeing mangroves, but that gives us good reason to go back. And things have settled down in Senegal, I think now, and I hope that that means that people can have a more environmental focus in their lives and sort of allow people like Babacar and Lon Plastique and Coach Mamadou to just continue with their lives normally and focus on the kind of things on the work that they do that's so important. But yeah, no, I think looking back on it, totally understanding of sort of the situation that was occurring, and it was important for us to just sort of stay inside and stay out the way and stay safe. I don't know if that's the answer. Yeah, I don't know what else. Yeah, I think. And the thing that I found really difficult with this one was I feel like that the protests and what was happening in Senegal was outside of our jurisdiction. Like, of course, I'm interested in politics and real and events, but it felt like it was outside of sort of the category that we put these films in, and it felt like I felt very awkward about trying to work out how to communicate that, and it's a conversation that we definitely had in Senegal of how we should communicate that, and I think maybe this conversation still shows that between the three of us, we're still a bit confused about how to communicate what happened while we were there, and maybe we disagree a little bit, because our jurisdiction really is just sort of environmental issues and surfing, and this definitely lies sort of connected to it, but outside of it. So we even questioned whether to include it at all. But it's an event that occurred whilst we were in the country, and it felt necessary to comment on it.
Yeah, I guess kind of just to wrap up, I think we can talk about surfing and environmentalism forever. But I guess just to kind of provide some next steps for the Goat Surf Club, maybe if anybody wants to chat about what we have planning next, maybe teasing some upcoming locations, projects, what we're excited about, maybe being honest about like what the state of the Goat Surf Club is at now. I don't know. If we have any thoughts, I'm curious. Hear what you have to say.
I want to keep doing this forever. I want to go surfing with the boys and meet some cool people doing some cool things. That's where I'm at.
I think this conversation has also made me realize a bit of an evolution in like the ethos of the Goat Surf Club as well. Like I remember starting, so Morocco was like, okay, like people enjoy following us on our adventures, okay. In Ireland, I was like really fixated on this like uplifting, like positive environmental stories. And then Senegal, I think, has like made me learn a bit more like, okay, like climate motivation, hope, and like engagement to work in climate change is maybe a more healthy way of going at it, not just like forcing optimism and uplifting this down people's throat. Even though we sometimes do that in our everyday lives as like positive people, in these series to like take Goat Surf Club adventures and then the documentaries we make as something that like inspires awareness and engagement and maybe makes people want to find the l'homme plastique of their community or become the l'homme plastique of their community. So I'm really excited to let that guide me a bit more now. Like think about what really motivates me in my view of sustainability in my action and in my work, and either whether that's like a kind of environment, like a kind of location, whether it's a kind of wave or a culture that we go and visit. So I mean, like I said before, Senegal didn't necessarily tick all the surf boxes. So I would maybe be a bit more like brutal about us not being overly optimistic on swell seasons this time, and would potentially be more open-minded to a slightly more reliable surf location. And then we might also have more time to focus on the other stuff because we won't be chasing so much.
That's a good point. I think too the reality of filming these things is like really tough because we are trying to balance a having a fun and meaningful experience in and of itself, because the three of us, if we're not having a good experience or we're not having an experience of anything, then there's nothing to film, right? And so we're trying to like have interesting conversations with people. We're trying to like have good waves that we can talk about or that like we can show on video. um, and I think Senegal was kind of, and I think Ireland was probably the most challenging with like a period of like 4 or 5 days of just like not surfing at all because it was so windy and we couldn't literally find any waves to surf anywhere. I think despite all of us not being like necessarily high performance surfers, like we can go out and we can surf in all sorts of environments, maybe other than like big waves. Um, but I think like big waves. I don't know, Tom. I don't know how you do, but you could probably maybe take it on. But I think all that to be said, I think it's interesting to think about like this next step because I think, like you said, Tom, every single season that we do, we've done Morocco, we've done Ireland, we've done Senegal. Now going into this fourth season, like we've had like some wins on like the distribution side, like both with outside getting involved, the Water Bear Network getting involved with this season. This season will be featured on the Water Bear Network, and so there's been like definitely like professional developments happening in the Goat Surf Club, like more exciting conversations with brands about getting involved and all sorts of things. But I think the filming reality is like you're right. If we can have really good waves somewhere or more consistent waves, maybe we can go out and film 4 days of surfing and we'll get all the surfing clips we need for the entire series and we can devote that time to like environmental projects versus like I mean both the days that we or actually all three of the days that we connected with locals we also surfed that same day. Babacar, Coach Mamadou, and the Plastic Man, we surfed before or after all those sessions because we're like it's good today and we don't know if it's going to be good in a few days, so we have to go now, you know. But I think for upcoming projects, like locations wise, we're looking at like Costa Rica, the Faroe Islands, Japan, a few different other places. But and we'll see. Like there's a lot of things up in the air on where exactly we'll go next. Hence the censorship at the end. Those conversations with networks and brands and all sorts of the behind the scenes business aspect that happens with the Goat Surf Club. Like that is a lot of what determines where we go next. And so yeah, I'm excited to see what comes of it for sure. Do you guys have any closing thoughts, things you'd like to share, things we didn't talk about that maybe you want to touch on before we fully wrap up?
I want to just say big shout out to like all of the, yeah, like we were so lucky to spend time with Victor, Gayan, and Tati, and then to see our friends Steph and Ida. Like, I think it was cool how we spent a bit more time on like on land, like in between ocean and sustainability stories, and being able to engage more in Senegalese culture, like going to the music, seeing our friends, and then being like fortunate to be invited into their houses for wonderful meals. Like that was a really big difference for me on this trip. So I'm definitely open-minded to some connections like that directing us for the next one. And also the way the series ended up focusing so much on marine plastics, like really enjoyed that like more focused look on a particular area of sustainability. So if a cool story or series of stories comes together for a location in relation to that, I'll be really keen to latch onto it.
I completely agree with both of you, and I think what was really interesting about Senegal, and yeah, of course, I want to say thank you to everyone as well. Um, but the focus of the film is something I really wasn't expecting. I was expecting to go to Senegal and see some awesome mangroves, and you know, meet this guy who's talking about plastic, but see what else he's doing as well. And but yeah, I really didn't expect that focus going into it. So Senegal's definitely sort of a film that surprised me over the making of it. I really didn't expect it to turn out the way it did. So I think that was beautiful. And you know, often maybe we'll go to a destination and expect to be speaking to people about a certain issue and leave with a completely different picture that we showed up with. So hopefully we can sort of share those stories. But also, I would like to start doing. Oh, I'd like to also go to these exotic places like the Faroe Islands, Costa Rica, Japan. But I'd also like to do stories of like where we're from too. Like, how cool would it be if we could get in touch with the? I know there's a really small Finnish scene, but it exists. It would be awesome to surf the Baltic, but yeah, of course that's going to be tiny waves, Tom, and and it's going to be super hard to film. We'd probably have to fly on a super last minute thing, but it would be cool to do some stories in the US as well, Rue. I'm sure there's some. I mean, I know there's some awesome people doing great work in different places along the coastline of the US, and then also I would love to do a film in Scotland or in Wales where all of this started, um, because there's a lot of great work happening here too. So that's something that I'd really like to do.
I love it. Yeah. Endless amounts of stories to be told, for sure. I think what's exciting about all of this is like it's a repeatable concept, right? Like the concept is we go on surf adventures and we meet up with environmentalists like on these adventures and we see what we learn. And I feel like it's Senegal especially, like I feel like it was kind of a testament to kind of our team too, right? Like of course, like it's a lot of like my face and my filming and my editing in the videos, but like a lot of the researching happens. A lot of these just like we have dozens of discussions just like this one trying to figure out the types of stories that we want to share, how we want to share those stories. Like there's so much teamwork that goes into all of this, and all of our strengths supplement each other so differently. And I think it's nice to have like to go into this as a team and to think like, okay, we can continue to do this, and this is something that like we will continue to do. Um, of course, like there's the whole business side that like determines at what scale we do it. But it is exciting, I think, to rewatch these videos and think about like the stories that we're trying to share, and not just the stories that we're trying to share, but the stories that then like present themselves to us. And I think with the plastic pollution theme in Senegal, like you're right, we didn't go in being like we're going to make a film about plastic pollution in Senegal and that's going to guide our whole series. We're like, let's do environmentalism in Senegal and just see where it goes. So I think it is exciting to like do this series, create the series, learn from it, see like what we can do better next time, and continue to like level up. And if you're watching and you've watched all the Morocco, Ireland, and Senegal series, first off, thank you. I know it's a lot of your time. Hopefully it's enjoying. Hopefully this kind of conversation can open up like some of who we are and some of our thoughts around the whole series as well. But also hopefully you'll see like incremental increases in quality and storytelling and editing and all sorts of research and all sorts of things as time goes on. And hopefully we'll continue to make better videos and tell better stories in the future. So all that to say, I know this was long. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is, like we said, an ongoing series. So if you're able to like subscribe to the YouTube channel or leave reviews or share the video with your friends if they think they'll enjoy it, that would be awesome. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.